In the heart of a dense, ancient forest, Mark, a solitary traveler, walked along a narrow trail. He wasn't there for an adventure or a vacation. Life had dealt him heavy blows, leaving him searching for solace in the wilderness. He thought nature might help heal the cracks in his soul. But what awaited him was something far beyond his imagination. The day was unusually quiet. The usual chirping of birds and rustling of leaves seemed to have vanished. A sense of unease crept over him, but Mark kept walking. Then, suddenly, he heard it, a faint, desperate cry. It was unlike anything he had ever heard before. Was it an animal in distress? Mark's curiosity turned into concern. He pushed through thick bushes and followed the sound until he stumbled upon a heartbreaking sight. A small wolf cub, no bigger than a house cat, lay curled up beside a fallen wolf. The adult wolf, its fur matted and body heaving with shallow breaths, was clearly the cub's mother. Her eyes, filled with pain and fear, locked onto Mark as if pleading for mercy. Mark froze. He knew wolves were dangerous and protective of their young, but this one seemed different. The mother wolf didn't growl or bare her teeth. She was too weak, too defeated to fight. The cub whimpered, nudging its mother's side, as though begging her to wake up. Mark's heart ached at the sight. He had always believed in helping those in need, no matter the risk. Carefully, he knelt down, his hands trembling. "Hey there," he whispered softly, unsure if the wolves could sense his kindness. "I won't hurt you. Let me help." The mother wolf let out a low whine but didn't move. Mark took it as permission. He examined her wound, a jagged gash along her side, likely from a hunter's trap. The cub continued to cry, its tiny body shivering in the cold. Mark realized he couldn't leave them there. Gathering his courage, he decided to help. Mark wasn't a doctor, much less a vet, but he knew he had to act fast. He rummaged through his backpack for supplies. All he had was a bottle of water, some antiseptic wipes, and an old t-shirt he could tear into strips. He first tried to clean the mother wolf's wound, pouring water over it while speaking gently. The wolf flinched but didn't lash out. The cub watched closely, its wide, golden eyes filled with both fear and hope. "Hold on, girl," Mark said softly. "We'll get you through this." Mark wrapped the wound as best he could, using the t-shirt strips to create a makeshift bandage. The cub licked its mother's face, as though encouraging her to stay strong. Despite the pain, the mother wolf's eyes softened. She seemed to trust Mark, and that trust only strengthened his resolve. But danger wasn't far. The sun was setting, and the forest would soon be shrouded in darkness. Mark knew predators roamed these woods at night. Carrying an injured wolf and her cub through such peril was a daunting task, but he had no choice. He couldn't leave them behind. Mark fashioned a sling from his jacket to carry the cub while he gently lifted the mother wolf into his arms. She was surprisingly light, her frail body a testament to her struggle to survive. The cub nestled against his chest, its tiny paws clutching at his shirt. Every step was a challenge. The uneven terrain and the weight of the wolves tested his strength, but Mark pressed on. He had to find shelter before nightfall. As dusk turned to darkness, the forest seemed to come alive with eerie sounds. Owls hooted, branches creaked, and the occasional distant howl sent shivers down Mark's spine. He knew he was a stranger in this world, a fragile human in a realm of wild beasts. Finally, after what felt like hours, Mark spotted a small cave nestled in a rocky hill. It wasn't much, but it offered safety from predators and the cold night air. He carefully set the mother wolf down on a bed of soft moss and placed the cub beside her. Exhausted but determined, Mark started a small fire at the cave's entrance using his lighter and some dry twigs. The flickering flames cast warm light on the wolves, and for the first time, Mark saw a glimmer of peace in the mother wolf's eyes. Mark shared the little food he had, some crackers and dried meat. He soaked a piece of cloth in water and let the mother wolf drink from it. The cub, now less fearful, sniffed at Mark's hand before licking it. It was a gesture of gratitude, one that filled Mark with an unexplainable warmth. as the fire crackled and the wolves rested. Mark leaned against the cave wall, his body aching but his heart full. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing. He couldn't abandon these creatures. They were now his responsibility. The next morning, Mark woke to the sound of birds chirping. The storm that had threatened the night before had passed, leaving the forest glistening with dew. The mother wolf was still weak but seemed slightly better. Her breathing was steadier, and her eyes had regained a spark of life. Mark checked her wound and was relieved to see no signs of infection. The cub, now more playful, pounced on Mark's boot, earning a chuckle from him. "You're a feisty little one, aren't you?" he said, ruffling its fur. The bond between Mark and the wolves grew stronger with each passing hour. The mother wolf, once wary, now allowed him to touch her without flinching. The cub followed him everywhere, its tiny tail wagging with newfound trust. But Mark knew their journey wasn't over. They couldn't stay in the cave forever. The mother wolf needed proper care, and the cub deserved a safe place to grow. Mark decided to find a wildlife sanctuary that could take them in. As Mark prepared to leave the cave, he heard a noise that made his blood run cold, a low, guttural growl. He turned to see a massive bear emerging from the shadows. Its eyes locked onto Mark and the wolves, and it looked hungry. Mark's heart pounded as he instinctively stepped in front of the wolves. The mother wolf, despite her injury, bared her teeth and let out a warning growl. The cub hid behind her, trembling. Mark knew they stood no chance against the bear, but he refused to back down. Grabbing a burning stick from the fire, he waved it at the bear, shouting as loudly as he could. "Get back!" he yelled, his voice echoing through the forest. The bear hesitated, its eyes fixed on the flames. For a tense moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, with a final growl, the bear turned and lumbered away. Mark collapsed to his knees, trembling from the adrenaline. The mother wolf let out a soft whine, as if thanking him for his bravery. Mark reached out and gently stroked her head. "We're in this together," he said, his voice shaky but determined. The bond between man and beast had deepened, but their journey was far from over. What awaited them next would test their courage, trust, and strength in ways they could never have imagined. With the threat of the bear behind them, Mark knew staying in the cave was no longer an option. The mother wolf, though still weak, managed to stand on shaky legs, leaning on Mark for support. The cub stayed close, its wide eyes watching everything nervously. Mark fashioned a sling from his backpack, carefully placing the cub inside so it could rest while he carried its mother. His shoulders ached, and his legs were already tired. But he pushed through, knowing they couldn't stop until they reached safety. As they made their way through the forest, Mark couldn't help but reflect on his life. He had come here to escape his own pain, grief from losing his wife in a car accident that left him hollow and directionless. Yet here he was, risking everything for creatures he had just met. Somehow, their struggle felt like a mirror of his own. Broken, lost, but still fighting to survive. The forest seemed endless, with its winding trails and towering trees, but Mark kept moving. Along the way, he talked to the wolves, his voice soft and reassuring. "You'll see," he said, glancing at the cub. "There's a better place waiting for you. We'll get there, I promise." Though they couldn't understand his words, the wolves seemed comforted by his presence. The mother wolf's eyes, once filled with fear, now held a quiet trust that strengthened Mark's resolve. After hours of walking, the forest began to thin, and the outline of a small village came into view. Mark sighed in relief, though he knew entering civilization with a wolf and her cub wouldn't be easy. He decided to approach cautiously, hiding the wolves in a thicket near the village edge. "Stay here," he whispered to them. The mother wolf gave a low whine, as if reluctant to let him go. But Mark gently patted her head. "I'll be back, I promise." The village was quiet, with only a few people wandering the dirt streets. Mark approached an elderly woman tending to her garden and explained the situation as best he could without alarming her. "I need help," he said. "There's an injured animal, a wolf, and her cub. They're in bad shape. The woman's eyes widened, but instead of fear, they showed compassion. Bring them here, she said, motioning toward her small barn. I'll help however I can. Mark wasted no time. He returned to the thicket, scooped up the cub, and helped the mother wolf hobble to the barn. The old woman, named Clara, had already laid out blankets and a bowl of water. She's lucky you found her, Clara said, examining the mother wolf's wound. Most people wouldn't have stopped. Mark stayed by the wolf's side as Clara cleaned the wound more thoroughly and applied herbs. The mother wolf growled faintly at first but soon relaxed under Clara's gentle touch. The cub explored the barn, sniffing at everything, its tail wagging for the first time. For the first time in days, Mark felt a glimmer of hope. As the wolves rested, Mark and Clara sat outside the barn, sharing stories over a cup of tea. Clara had lived in the village her whole life and had a reputation for nursing injured animals back to health. Wolves are special, she said. They are loyal, protective, and fiercely loving. Sounds like you earned their trust. Mark nodded, staring into his cup. They've given me a purpose, he admitted. I came to the forest to get away from everything. My wife died a year ago. I thought being alone would help, but his voice broke, and he quickly wiped his eyes. Clara placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Sometimes, healing comes in the most unexpected ways, she said. Maybe helping them is how you'll help yourself. Mark looked back at the barn, where the cub was curled up beside its mother. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace, a tiny spark of something he hadn't felt in months: hope. The next morning, Mark was awoken by the sound of shouting. He rushed outside to see a group of villagers gathered near the barn, pointing and arguing. A man with a rifle slung over his shoulder stepped forward, his face hard and unyielding. "That wolf killed my livestock," he barked. "We can't have dangerous animals here." Mark's stomach dropped. "She's injured and harmless," he argued, stepping in front of the barn. "And she has a cub. They are no threat to anyone." The man sneered. "Wolves are always a threat. I say we put them down before they cause more trouble." Clara stepped in, her voice firm. "This man saved them. They deserve a chance to live. I'll take responsibility for them." But the crowd wasn't convinced. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group, and the man with the rifle raised his weapon. Mark's heart raced as he positioned himself between the wolves and the villagers. "You'll have to go through me first," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gripping him. The mother wolf, sensing the danger, limped to Mark's side. Though weak, she stood tall, baring her teeth in silent defiance. The cub peeked out from behind her, its tiny growl echoing its mother's courage. The villagers hesitated. Seeing the bond between Mark and the wolves softened some of their expressions, but the man with the rifle wasn't swayed. "This is a mistake," he muttered, lowering his gun. "But if they cause trouble, it's on you." The tension eased as the villagers dispersed, though Mark knew the wolves weren't safe yet. He thanked Clara for her help and made a decision. "I need to get them to a sanctuary," he said. "Somewhere they can be safe." Clara nodded. "There's one not far from here. I'll draw you a map." With a new sense of purpose, Mark prepared for the journey. He fashioned a sturdy cart from old wooden planks to carry the wolves more easily. The cub, ever curious, climbed onto the cat with excitement, while the mother wolf rested, her eyes watching Mark with quiet gratitude. As they set off, Clara waved from the edge of the village. "Good luck, Mark. And remember, you're not just saving them. They are saving you too." Mark smiled, his heart full. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. This journey wasn't just about survival. It was about redemption, healing, and the unbreakable bond between man and beast. What lay ahead would test their courage once more, but Mark was ready. Together, they would face whatever came next, because now they were a family. Mark's journey toward the wildlife sanctuary was both physically and emotionally demanding. The narrow forest trail soon gave way to rocky paths, but Mark pressed on. The cart carrying the mother wolf and her cub bounced with every step, and he checked on them constantly, speaking to them in soothing tones. "You're going to love it there," he said, though he wasn't sure if it was to comfort the wolves or himself. "It's a safe place, away from danger. You'll finally be free." The mother wolf, though still weak, had started to regain some strength. She would occasionally lift her head to look at Mark with those soulful eyes that seemed to say, "Thank you." The cub, now more playful and curious, would climb onto Mark's lap every time they stopped to rest. As the hours turned into days, Mark began to notice a change within himself. The weight of his grief, though still present, felt lighter. Each step toward the sanctuary felt like a step toward healing, not just for the wolves but for his own broken heart. On the third night of their journey, the weather took a turn for the worse. Dark clouds loomed overhead, and a sudden downpour drenched them within minutes. The cart wheels got stuck in the muddy trail, and the wolves huddled together, trembling from the cold. Mark worked tirelessly to free the cat, his hands numb from the rain. Exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, but the thought of the wolves kept him going. He finally managed to move the cart under a large tree for shelter. Lighting a fire with his soaked matches was nearly impossible, but Mark didn't give up. After several attempts, a small flame flickered to life, casting a warm glow in the darkness. He wrapped the cub in his jacket and sat close to the mother wolf, letting his own body heat keep her warm. As the rain poured outside their little sanctuary, Mark whispered, "We'll make it. I promise. We're too close to give up now." Though the wolves couldn't respond, the mother wolf licked his hand, her gesture speaking volumes. In that moment, Mark realized just how much they depended on him and how much he now depended on them. By morning, the storm had passed, but the delay had cost them precious time. Mark knew the sanctuary was only a day's walk away, but the mother wolf's condition was deteriorating. Her wound, though healing, had taken a toll on her strength. Mark picked up the pace, his muscles burning as he pushed the cat through uneven terrain. He didn't stop to rest, fueled by determination and the thought of giving the wolves a second chance at life. As they neared the sanctuary, a deep howl echoed through the forest. Mark froze. It wasn't the mother wolf or her cub. It was a pack of wild wolves, and they were close. The mother wolf perked up, her ears twitching. For the first time in days, she let out a low, mournful howl, answering the call. Mark's heart sank. He realized what this meant. The mother wolf's pack was nearby, and they were searching for her. Just a mile from the sanctuary, the pack appeared. They emerged from the shadows one by one, strong, majestic creatures with piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate Mark's every move. The mother wolf lifted her head, her eyes brightening as the largest wolf approached. It was the pack's alpha, and his demeanor was both cautious and commanding. The cub let out an excited yip, running toward the other wolves. Mark stood back, his heart torn. He had imagined delivering the wolves to the sanctuary, where they would be safe and cared for. But now he realized their true home wasn't behind fences or under human care. It was with their family. The mother wolf slowly rose to her feet, her strength returning as if fueled by the sight of her pack. She turned to Mark, her golden eyes locking onto his. In that silent moment, Mark felt her gratitude, her trust, and her love. "You're home now," he said, his voice breaking. "Go on. Be free." The mother wolf nuzzled his hand one last time before joining the pack. The cub hesitated, looking back at Mark with wide, innocent eyes, before following its mother. The pack disappeared into the forest, their howls echoing through the trees. Mark stood there for a long time, his heart heavy but full. He had given them a chance at life, and in doing so, he had found a piece of himself he thought he had lost. Mark finally reached the sanctuary alone, carrying only his memories of the wolves. He shared their story with the sanctuary staff, who listened with awe and admiration. "They were lucky to have found you," one of them said. Mark shook his head. I was lucky to find them. As he walked back to the forest trail, he felt a sense of closure he hadn't known he needed. The wolves had reminded him that even in the darkest moments, there is hope, love, and a chance to start over. If this story touched your heart, remember that there are countless animals out there who need our help. Whether it's supporting wildlife sanctuaries, rescuing animals, or simply spreading awareness, we all have the power to make a difference. Let's be the voice for those who can't speak. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more stories of hope and resilience. Together, we can create a kinder world for animals and for ourselves. With a smile and a final glance at the forest, Mark walked away, leaving behind not just a story, but a legacy of kindness and courage.